I've now written 3 books with a few more coming, and I think I know a few things that could save you some time, what you need to know before writing a book. I first of all want to reassure you that I'm speaking from experience because I have now written 3 books. Incidentally, you can get this one for free. You just pick up the shipping. There's a link down in the description. I'll remind you of that at the end as well. These 3 books have taught me a lot about what you need to know in order to write a book or before you write it. And the first thing is, who is this for? Who is my audience? That's important because the tone of this book will be dictated by who you think is going to be reading it. The obvious example, if you're writing a children's book, you're going to approach that very differently than if you're going to write a textbook for medical students. Those are pretty diverse audiences, aren't they? Who's your audience? That's going to help you to shape not only your message, but the way you deliver the content. I asked, who's your audience? Who's the book for? Let's be honest. If this book is for you, just own that. And this is totally legitimate, by the way. I know people who write books solely for themselves. They don't have any intention of sharing it with an audience beyond themselves or maybe their immediate family. Good example of that, family history books. Family history books can be compiled. It takes a lot of work, by the way, to do one of these. The intended audience is you and your immediate family. That's totally fine. You can see that you're going to approach that differently than if you have a broader audience. So even if that audience is you or your immediate family, just get clear about that right up front. Because the next step is to figure out, what is my message? What is it that I'm trying to say? When I wrote my first book, Pathological Positivity, it was basically a brain dump. I knew that there was a book in me. I had been telling myself for 10 years or more that I'm going to write a book. And you know, it was always true every time I said it. I'm going to! It's like some undefined future event, right? Well, when I started writing the book, I just started brain dumping everything that was on my mind because all that has to be in my book, right? My book, it's like the ultimate product of my brain. No, my creative editor, Thomas Cantrell, big shout out to you, Thomas, you're so awesome, gave me a heads up to the fact that this brain dump is not my message. My message is somewhere in there, and we're going to have to figure out what that message is. You got to know what your message is. And I remember one day when I was working with Thomas as we were trudging through all of this brain dump that I'd put out there, I said, you know, Thomas, sometimes people call me pathologically positive. And I don't know if that's even a compliment. And he said, wait, stop, what? I said, people sometimes say that I'm pathologically positive. He says, that's it. That is your message. In fact, that's the title of the book, and that's where it came from. That became my core message, how to be positive no matter what. And when I got clear about that, it started to steer the way I was writing, the way we were editing. And you know what? About 146 pages or so of that brain dump got stuck into what Thomas and I called the basement. It's just a file in my computer where all of that material that I brain dumped is still there. I'll probably use it for future books. Some of it is already slated for 2 of my upcoming books. But it's not in here. I'm not going to burden you with that because that's not part of the core message of this particular book. So you got to get clear and think about, what is my core message? Don't worry about all of that stuff that you want to say, but it's not part of your core message. That's why you can write multiple books. Now let's get a little more practical. Another thing you got to think about before you write your book is, how am I going to use this? What is its intended purpose? I've given you a little bit of heads up to that with different examples, like the family history book. What's the intended purpose of that? Well, it's to record your family history, and you want to share that with your family. People outside of your family probably not as interested unless you've got a really colorful family, and some of you do. What is my intended purpose? Now, for me, the purpose was to teach principles that I found myself repeating over and over and over with all of my clients over a couple of decades of clinical practice. And I thought, what if I could compile all of that into a concise message that helps people to understand that. I can use that as a teaching tool. And then I also had another purpose in mind, because this book for me has become a marketing tool. In fact, I already told you you can get a free copy of this. You just pay for the shipping. Check that out in the description, and not because I want to sell you a book. I'm going to give it to you for free. You pay for the shipping, because if this is in your hands, you know more about what my philosophies are and what I'm teaching people. So that's part of the intended purpose for this book, for which there's a new edition coming out, a new cover, and we're repurposing it along some of those lines. But notice that that purpose helps me to understand, how am I going to craft this thing? And putting it in your hands gives me an opportunity now to interact with you, to send a follow-up email, to see if you want to do some coaching with me. See, that's a marketing tool. When I speak, a lot of times if I'm speaking in an event, let's say there's 200 people at a conference and I'm doing the keynote or some breakouts and training or a combination of those things, I'll often package into that copies of my book, because I'm using that to help put something in people's hands. What if your objective, what if the purpose for the book is to make money? Okay, well, that's an important thing to understand going into it, because you're going to approach that differently than if you're simply using it as a marketing tool or a teaching tool. So get clear about your purpose. That purpose is going to drive the next question, because there's a basic question that all authors have to answer for themselves. How am I going to publish this thing? And there are two basic options here: traditional or established publishing house, self-publish, which is becoming a more popular option all the time, because in our on-demand society, there's so many ways that you can repurpose your content from the book if you've self-published that you would be restricted from doing if you were to go with a publishing house. Now, there's advantages and disadvantages both ways. I've self-published all of my books so far. That doesn't mean that I won't use a publishing house at some point. I think the advantage of a publishing house is primarily distribution, because they already have relationships with bookstores or with online retailers, airports, whatever. That is a huge advantage, because you get to tap into that market. The advantages, I think, of self-publishing, and the reason I've chosen to go that direction, is because of the way I use my content and reuse and repurpose and even license my content for other coaches to use. So that's a more attractive option for me. And it gives me a bigger profit margin if I'm selling my book in an event, for example. How am I going to publish it? There's advantages and disadvantages both ways, so consider that as you consider writing your book. And that also speaks to the marketing and sales part of this. Marketing and sales sometimes sounds like, oh, I don't want to have that kind of business thing. I just want to write a book and let some people enjoy it. Well, what people? That's marketing. How do you get the word out to the people who want to read your book? Let's say that you're writing a novel or a science fiction thriller or whatever it is. Okay, you're going to market to those audiences. That's why we had to get clear about who it's for. You've got to have some strategy for how you're going to get your book in front of the people who want to read it. And that's marketing and sales. So these other decisions that you're making about writing your book are going to inform that one as well. Now let's get practical. After we finish our conversation here, would you check into the next video that I've queued up for you right up there? Just click on that, it'll queue it up and you can watch it after this one's done, about how to start writing your book. Because there's a lot of very practical things that you're going to have to figure out. When am I going to do my writing, for example? Now for me, that was every Saturday morning from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. 2 hours every Saturday morning, I was up writing. Why? Well, nobody else wants me at 5 in the morning. I've got the place to myself. Okay? Not even the dog is up at that hour. So it was quiet. It was peaceful. That's when my brain works. I'm a morning person anyway. And that irritates the heck out of Vicky. But anyway, that's who I am. And so that's when I did it. When are you going to write? It doesn't just happen magically. You've got to find it in your calendar, in your schedule. When am I going to write? I know that sounds simple, but you got to answer that question. And then also, who's going to help me? I mentioned Thomas. My dear friend and creative editor, Thomas Cantrell, was essential to my process because he was challenging my thinking. He was helping me to see what the clarity of my message was. We had a whole team of people who were reviewing the drafts as we completed them and giving feedback and helping with editing and proofreading. And I had designers to work on the covers. You don't have to do this on your own. Find out who you're going to be working with. And for me, the way I found Thomas was that 3 of the books that I really enjoyed that were written by colleagues of mine had the same creative editor, and it was him. So I reached out to him. I liked his work product. I trusted that. You can find your own team, but understand that there's going to be a team and start thinking about who's going to help you with this. You've got this. You are an author. You just maybe haven't started writing yet. Well, it's time to get going on that. If you need a little extra help, I would be happy to be a bigger part of your team. You know what? Start out with what I already suggested to you. Get your free copy of my book. That puts you into my loop and we can have some conversations and some back and forth. There might be some other ways that I can assist you with some coaching. Get the free book first. Down below in the description, drpauljenkins.com, you'll see a big orange button once you click through and it'll be obvious how to get a copy of this. You just pick up the shipping. I'll send it to you for free. And then I tell her how to look into my eyes and never let it go.